Now, you all know Pat Williams as an NBA Hall of Famer, co-founder of the Orlando Magic, and former general manager of the Philadelphia 76ers. And of course, from the last time that he was here with us. He's also one of America's leading speakers and the author, get this, more than 100 books. That's a lot of books to write. His latest is this one. It's called Revolutionary Leadership. Would you please give a warm welcome to a dear friend, Pat Williams. Thank you, Pat. You know, it's like, Pat, you've felt the need to personally populate the entire Library of Congress, which is a pretty big building. But I mean, you've written so much. I don't know, do you ever say the well is dry, there's nothing left?
No, Mike. I've got about 50 more books in the pipeline here that I'd like to write. But I'm most excited about this one that has just come out, Revolutionary Leadership. I've got many interests, Mike, but two of them are American history.
Yeah.
My dad was a high school history teacher. And secondly, leadership. And so the thought behind this book was if we could study these founders, we call them founders of our country, what did they do well as leaders? And why did this country even come into existence? So that was the background. And then we poured ourselves into digging in and researching and figuring out who should be in the book. And we came away, yes, with the famous ones. We all know them. But boy, we discovered some fascinating other men and women, and it was really interesting to do.
I think that's what I love about the book. Sure, you give us Washington and Jefferson and the people that we know, but you introduce us to some people whose names are not immediately right there on the top of our list when we think of the founders, but these are people critical to the creation of this country. Who's a favorite of yours as you think about the book?
Well, let's talk for a minute about Lafayette. Lafayette was from France. He was a Frenchman. He hears about the war going on here. He's 19 years old, gets on a ship by himself, didn't know a soul, comes across the ocean, gets off on the port in South Carolina, wins his way up to Philadelphia, and somehow or other he comes into contact with George Washington. Now it's interesting at this point, Benjamin Franklin is in France, and all these French people want to come over here and be part of this effort. And Washington is tired of him. He said they're entitled and he didn't want any more. No more French. And he writes Franklin a letter and says, no more French. Don't send any more. But somehow Lafayette slips through the cracks and gets in with Washington. Washington all but adopts him. He views him almost as a son. Washington didn't have children of his own. But this young Frenchman caught his fancy. And Washington engaged him and he put him to work. And he was in combat, Battle of the Brandywine. He was there at Yorktown. And we don't win the war without Lafayette. And so Lafayette goes back to France, and he almost loses his life when that revolution erupts. But later on, well into his life, at the end of his life, he comes back to America and does a tour, a grand tour, and he's greeted triumphantly. And so when you think today, Mike, of Lafayette, Louisiana, and Lafayette, Indiana, and Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Lafayette College in Pennsylvania. That's this 19-year-old kid who came over here to help this new nation win the war.
If you were teaching history to young people today, what lesson would you make sure they got about the origins of America?
The United States of America is a miracle.
Yeah.
It's an absolute miracle. This country...
It is. So true.
Mike, this country had no business coming into existence. England was the most powerful force on earth. They had a big army. They had the ability to go hire 20,000 Hessians to come over and fight with the English. And they had the world's greatest navy. And here we were with our little colonies who were disjointed and struggling. The soldiers never got paid most of the time. Many of them had no clothes. Boots? Nah, forget it. Weaponry? Not really. We were outdone in everything. But the one thing we had that the British didn't was leadership. When we pay tribute, Mike, to George Washington, it's all deserved.
Yeah.
The father of our country, but yet there was a modesty to him. But as you read and study, the thing he had going for him was his presence. He was 6'2", in an era when people were short. And when he walked in a room, they say he owned that room.
And now, Pat, there are people who want to take the statues down of all of these people that we ought to be talking about and remembering for their courage and what you talk about here, revolutionary leadership.
Mike, I get worked up over that. Without Washington, we don't have a country.
Yeah.
And you know, he was a farmer at heart. So after the war ends, 8 years of this war, he never left the troops once. He was with them year-round 8 years. So now he goes home to Mount Vernon. He's finally, but they try and get this new country started, and they're not doing well. It's not working. And they come to him and say, General, we need you back. And he knew the decisions and what he was doing as our first president was going to lay the groundwork for centuries. And he did it well. And then at the end of the 8 years, he goes back home and got our country started. And wasn't perfect, but he wasn't perfect. But boy, he was a great leader.
None of us are either, but we have people before us who did exemplary things, and that's what I love about this book, Revolutionary Leadership. And Pat, thank you for being here. I want to tell our audience, the book is available right now, and you can find inspirational videos, booking information to bring Pat to your community, and a whole lot more at patwilliams.com, also on his social media pages.